I think it's undeniable. Every film, every story has that moment.
What is your writing process?
As I mentioned, I have ideas rattling in my head. When I decide that I want to work on something, the first thing that I do is I get a composition notebook, usually like one of those black and white speckled notebooks. And that's a holdover from junior high. My writing teacher, that's what she made us, we had to get the black and white speckled notebook. That's where all of our assignments, we did them in that notebook. So that's just stuck with me to this day. I get a notebook, write the working title on the cover, and on the first page is reserved for the title and character names. I usually start with the protagonist, right? Once I've got that notebook, every idea, every thought that I have about this story goes into that notebook. There's no real rhyme or reason. I don't, aside from the first page, I don't have, say, like a section for dialogue or anything like that. Everything that I've been thinking goes into that notebook. If I go out to have lunch or whatever and something hits me that I think would be perfect, I come back and I put it in that notebook. Once I have kind of like all the notes and everything, I craft my outline. My outlines are not too detailed. They're pretty spare. And this is because once I have the outline, I start writing, the story really, really like develops. It really begins to tell itself. I've got my notes, I've got the outline, I know what's supposed to happen, but it blossoms during the writing process. So I like to, keep things loose. The outline is like, very spare. And I mean, that's pretty much it. I write, I can't write out of order. I'm not one of those writers. I know a lot of people that say, oh, if a scene is hard for you, just write TK and come back to it. I can't do that. I have to work it out in that moment. And if I'm not able to work it out in that moment, then that's where I stop for the day. And when I come back to it the next day or whatever, let's give it another go. And yeah, that's pretty much my process. And I mean, that's for my books as well. All of my books, same thing. Get the notebook, write the characters, throw in whatever notes, outline it, and then write.
And are you reading the new work from the day before? Like, are you going through the entire thing of what you've written, or you're just starting from the scene right about where you're going to start up again?
Yeah, I just start from the scene. The thing is, I know the story. By the time I start writing the actual script, I know the story so well, I don't have to review the previous day's pages or, start from scratch. I don't have to do any of that. I just jump in at the scene and I keep going. And then once the script is finished, then, of course, I go back and I read from the beginning and see. And usually things work out. I mean, there may be some things that I'd have to shift or, whatever. Maybe there's a payoff that, didn't have a setup, and so I may need to include that or whatever. But for the most part, because I know the story so well, I can just jump right in.
And then when you finished the screenplay, do you give it some time before you go in and look at? Okay.
Definitely. It's the old put it in the drawer, don't think about it. I don't even give it to people to read at that point. I just let it sit and get to work on the next idea. And then I pull it out. And, once I pull it out, after some time, that's when I'll give it to readers, because it's kind of fresh for everyone, if that makes sense. So I get the feedback from my readers and, I've given it time, given it some distance, and it's just like, okay. I also find I'm more receptive to getting like feedback and notes because that time has passed and I'm a little bit removed from it, because when you're, I just finished it, it's my baby. If I get notes back right away saying, oh, perhaps you should consider this, it's like, no, how dare you? This is my baby. But with time and, it's like, all right, that makes sense. More receptive to the feedback.
Have you ever given it to someone and you decided that was the wrong person to give it to?
Oh, that happens often. That happens often. But I find more often than not that happens if I give it to someone who's perhaps not in the industry, someone who's knows nothing about screenwriting, or they're not as invested in storytelling. I like to do that just because I want to get an outsider's perspective. I just want to know what, Joe the common man knows, thinks about this script. But yeah, that does happen. That does happen from time to time.
Also, too, so many people consuming films, they're not in the industry.
Right.
And so, in some sense, if it can appeal to the working person in another state, not in the industry.
Right. And that's a large part of why I do it, because, for instance, I sent my buddy Ralph, I sent him a copy of my recent work in progress, because I imagine him as the everyman taking his wife to the movies on a Friday night. It's date night. And what do you think of this? So that's exactly why, give it to people who aren't also screenwriters or, in the industry.
Can you explain how you outline a screenplay?
It's not, yeah, sure. I mean, it's not like an in-depth process or anything. I literally write each scene out, just like a line describing each scene, right? I don't even number the scenes. I just draw a star with a circle around it. That's how I know, okay, new scene. And I write what's supposed to happen. And it's usually just like a line or two, because as I mentioned, in the actual writing of the script, the scene blossoms, it comes to life, things happen. So I don't get too detailed. It's just what's supposed to happen. And yeah, I don't aim for a set number of scenes. I know some people, 70 scenes and you have a movie. I think that's David Lynch who said something like that. I'm not an index card person. I never have been. Like, that just doesn't work for me. I just write the scenes down in my notebook and go from there.
Why do you love Save the Cat?
Save the Cat provides structure. And I do like structure. I know, based on what I said, like about the outline, it might not seem like I'm but I do like structure. And the thing about Save the Cat, when I read it, it was so funny. I found Save the Cat. This guy was selling books randomly, like on the street. And you see that a lot in New York, at least. Someone will have something set up. And I was walking past and, just looking at what he's selling. He's selling books and CDs and stuff. And I saw Save the Cat. And I'd heard of it, but I hadn't read it. And I asked him, okay, how much, for this book? He's like $1. I remember it's like $1. I was like, you got a deal. So I give him $1 and I take Save the Cat and I read it. And I understood why it kind of riled some people up. But again, it provides structure. Like, I don't think that you don't have to be beholden to like what it says. You don't have to treat it as gospel, right? You don't have to have a certain event happen on a certain page or whatever, but recognize that these elements are pretty much in every film and, we see in every script that we read. If you're looking to, as I am, write commercial feature films, it's not a bad guide to follow. It's not, and so that's honestly, that's why. And I think it's undeniable. Every film, every story has that moment, that catalyst that shakes up the protagonist's world. Every story has that moment where the character debates as to what they should do. I feel like every story has like that Save the Cat moment. It might not come at the very beginning, but there's that moment that you realize the protagonist more often than not is someone you want to root for. There's always a dark night of the soul. There always is, you know? So yeah, Save the Cat, it laid the structure out for me, and it gave me the terms, because I didn't know what all these terms, were called, but it lays it out, and I think it's brilliant. And even Sid Field did something similar. I mean, in Screenplay, he's okay, you've got your first, second, and third act, and then you've got your plot point A and your plot point B, and he had page numbers, but you don't have to stick to those page numbers. Just know that those elements should be present. Those elements should be present. You should include them.